Her name was Shula Kishik-Cohen. In the middle of the 20th century, everyone thought she was just a perfect wife and a caring mother of 7. She lived in Beirut with her husband, in a beautiful house, hosting guests and attending social events. People saw her as a refined lady from a respected family. Shula was friends with Lebanon's elite, officers, politicians, and wealthy businessmen. Polite, charming, and graceful, she could walk into any room and be welcomed. But in 1961, the truth came out. Shula Cohen was a Mossad agent. Behind the image of a devoted housewife was a fearless and cunning spy who, for 14 years, helped thousands of Jewish refugees escape from Arab countries to Israel. She was a passionate Zionist who could make deals even with the most dangerous people. But one day, her luck ran out. How was she exposed? What did the Lebanese authorities do to her? And what happened to the woman once called the Pearl of Beirut? She was born in Argentina in 1917. Her parents were devoted Zionists, people of faith and action. They believed the Jewish people must return to their homeland and build a state where Hebrew would be spoken and Jews could live without fear. So soon after Shula's birth, the family packed up and left South America for British-controlled Palestine. They settled in Jerusalem in a new neighborhood called Makor Baruch, one of the city's most promising areas at the time. From childhood, Shula grew up among people who lived by their ideals, not just talked about them. Her father and older brother were part of the Jewish underground, fighting against British restrictions. At home, they hid weapons, disguised as prayer items. Shula knew what they did was dangerous, but necessary. And like many kids of that time, she dreamed of serving her people one day, not with words, but with real action. She studied at the Evelina de Rothschild School, founded by a member of the Rothschild family's British branch. It was a modern school for religious Jewish girls where they learned literature, geography, foreign languages, and science, all in Hebrew, which was seen then as a bold act of Zionism. That's where Shula first heard about a new kind of woman, educated, strong, and ready to work for her nation's future. She grew up smart, confident, and, as people recalled, strikingly beautiful. Dark eyes, steady gaze, and a presence that made adults say, "This girl is special." But fate had other plans. When Shula turned 16, matchmakers came to her father from Beirut. The groom was young, handsome, and successful. He owned a store, had connections, and a spotless reputation. For her parents, it was a perfect marriage: security, respect, stability. For Shula, the end of her dream. She locked herself in her room and cried all night. She wanted freedom, a future in Palestine, a life of purpose. Instead, she was being sent to a foreign country, into a stranger's home, to play the role of an obedient wife. She didn't know then that this unwanted marriage, this bitter move, would become the beginning of a far more dangerous journey. After leaving Jerusalem, which had become her true home, Shula and her husband, Joseph Cohen, moved to Beirut, a city then under French control. The young couple settled in the Jewish quarter of Wadi Abu Jamil. Joseph was a wealthy, respected merchant who could provide his wife with everything: a spacious house, servants, fine jewelry, and a peaceful, comfortable life. But peace and comfort never suited Shula. She had grown up among people who fought for ideas and freedom. The spirit of Jerusalem, of action and purpose, was part of her. She couldn't just sit still and play the role of a polite housewife. She wanted to live, to act, to make things happen. Charming, beautiful, and endlessly social, Shula quickly became a well-known figure in Beirut's Jewish community, and soon, far beyond it. The Cohen home became a meeting place for everyone, not only Jews, but wealthy Muslims, Christians, diplomats, and officers. She was invited to receptions and dinners where people gossiped, made business deals, and whispered about politics. Over the years, the Cohen family grew. More children, more wealth, and with it, more influence. By then, Beirut had become the capital of independent Lebanon, a city known as the Little Paris of the Middle East. The streets were full of music and fashion, and its nightlife never stopped. Shula thrived in that world. Everyone knew her, everyone liked her, everyone talked to her. And that last part, people talking, was the most important. Over fine dinners and glasses of champagne, not only gossip was shared. When people drank too much, secrets slipped out. One evening, during a casual conversation about politics and the future, Shula heard something that changed her life forever. In the late 1940s, as the British were preparing to leave Palestine, officers in Beirut began quietly discussing joint Lebanese-Syrian plans to invade. They were planning to cross the border and destroy the newborn Jewish state before it could even take its first breath. For most, it was just another piece of news. For Shula, it was destiny calling. Suddenly, her life made sense. The marriage, the move, the isolation. Maybe, she thought, this was why God had placed her here, in Beirut, behind the glitter and charm, right where future enemies of her people were making their plans. She didn't hesitate for long. In 1947, Shula contacted members of the underground Jewish organization Shai, the early forerunner of Israel's intelligence service. She volunteered her help, asking for nothing in return. Her first message contained details about the planned Arab invasion. The information reached Israel and was taken seriously. Soon, in intelligence reports, she was given a new code name, the Pearl. From that moment, Shula Cohen's life split in two. By day, she was still the loving wife and mother, the elegant hostess in a fine Beirut home. But at night, when the city fell silent, she sat at her desk, writing short, precise reports, and secretly sending them to Palestine. This was the beginning of her double life, the story of the woman who, for 14 years, became Israel's eyes and ears in the heart of Lebanon. By the early 1950s, Shula Cohen had already made her mark on Middle Eastern history, though no one in Beirut yet suspected who was really hiding behind that elegant smile. Her missions were made easier by one thing: Lebanon itself. Corruption was everywhere. Money solved everything, from getting a permit or a passport to buying information of military value. If she couldn't learn something from a tipsy general over dinner, she could always buy it. And money wasn't a problem. Her husband, Joseph, knew everything about her secret work and fully shared her Zionist beliefs. Sometimes he even advised her whom to pay and how much to keep her operations invisible. Every evening, Shula appeared in Beirut's most expensive restaurants. While officers, politicians, and diplomats laughed and drank, she quietly conducted her own business. Each week, she gained more contacts, and with them, more secrets. Within the Jewish community, people whispered, "Why is this woman always meeting with military men? Why is she seen with officials?" But the Cohens ignored the gossip. They had a mission far more important: saving lives. After Israel declared independence, Arab governments banned Jews from leaving their countries. Thousands of Jewish families were trapped, stripped of rights, and living under constant threat. So Shula decided to do the impossible, to smuggle Jews out of Arab countries, through Lebanon, and into Israel. She built an entire network of routes. Some refugees were taken by sea in small boats that crossed to Israel under the cover of night. Others crossed the border on foot, at exact times when bribed officers sent patrols elsewhere. Some traveled with fake documents, bought for cash, or forged by underground craftsmen. The number of people she saved reached into the thousands. From Syria, Iraq, and even Iran, Jewish refugees were secretly brought to Beirut, and from there, Shula sent them to freedom. Most never knew who their mysterious savior was. In one of the first groups, back in 1949, she sent her own two eldest sons to Israel, where it was safer for them. That decision inspired many Jewish families in Beirut to do the same. All these operations she carried out almost entirely on her own. By day, a charming hostess, mother of 7. By night, a cold, determined agent who could outsmart even the most dangerous smugglers. She could negotiate with anyone: army officers, gangsters, traffickers, or Muslim leaders. She was respected by both Israeli intelligence and Beirut's criminal underworld. Soon she earned a nickname that fit her perfectly: Monsieur Shula. Even the toughest men obeyed her without question. Years later, one of her sons recalled, "As a child, I loved reading stories about superheroes and spies. I never imagined one of them was living right under our roof. It took me years to realize who my mother really was. Even her little daughter unknowingly took part in her secret missions. On weekends, I'd go to the store for candy. Since we didn't have a phone, Mom asked me to call a certain number from there and say something like 10, 15, or 20. I was 8 and had no idea what it meant. Only later I learned that was the number of Jews in the next group she was sending to Israel. But with time, the secret became harder to keep. Shula's network grew, her operations became more complex, and the number of people who knew even a little about her work continued to increase. With every new contact, every meeting, the risk of exposure rose. Shula understood that, but she had no intention of stopping. One night, everything went wrong. It started with a new wave of Syrian Jews trying to escape. By the fall of 1951, life for Jews in Damascus had become unbearable. Arrests, interrogations, synagogues shut down. On the eve of Rosh Hashanah, hundreds fled to Beirut, more than 300 people in total. They crowded into the Jewish quarter of Wadi Abu Jamil, hiding in basements and attics, without papers, living illegally. It was impossible to keep them hidden. They had to be sent to Israel, fast. The usual mountain routes were now closed. Lebanese forces had tightened border security. Then one of Shula's powerful friends, Abu Said, a man with a shady but useful reputation, offered another option. He was a casino and nightclub owner who practically ruled Beirut's Christian district and had connections everywhere. On his advice, Shula decided to send the refugees by sea. It was risky but possible, a cargo ship that could carry 100 people at a time. It would sail to the Israeli port of Nahariya and return to Beirut through Cyprus. The first 2 voyages went perfectly, but the third would be disastrous. It happened on the eve of Sukkot. Refugees were brought to the shore in taxis at night. 2 small boats were ferrying them through the dark toward the ship. Shula sat in a nearby cafe, calm as always, sipping her coffee while watching the operation. Then, sirens. Someone had reported them. Police? Panic. Shula ran to the beach, ordered 1 taxi back, and tried to stop the boarding. Gunfire broke out. She was spotted, but managed to rush back to the cafe and pretend nothing had happened. 12 people were arrested. The ship sailed off with only 30 refugees aboard. This time, it was serious. The prisoners fell into the hands of Muslim authorities, and neither Abu Said nor her ally, Major George Anton, had any influence there. So Shula took a desperate step. She went straight to Darwish Baidoun, one of the most dangerous men in Beirut, who controlled gambling, smuggling, and nightclubs in the Muslim sector. Risking her life, she negotiated with him and paid for the release of the Jews. A few days later, they were freed. But rumors began to spread. Soon, Shula was summoned for questioning. Anton warned her, never send a Christian lawyer to a Muslim police station. Following his advice, she hired a Muslim lawyer who knew how to stall the process and play the system. His plan was simple: delay the trial and build her defense around the testimony of Captain Nasrallah, who suffered from severe myopia. The lawyer argued that he couldn't possibly have recognized Shula at such a distance at night. At the time of the trial, Shula was pregnant with her 7th child. She was sentenced to 40 days in prison. After giving birth to her son, David, she served her sentence in the women's prison of Judarda in the mountains, though in reality it was more like a private house turned into a special facility thanks to the generous bribes her husband Joseph paid. Once released, Shula didn't stop. She created a new route, this time sending refugees to Turkey by plane using fake passports purchased from an official named Mahmoud Hodj. In Turkey, Israeli agents took over. Meanwhile, the world around her was changing. In 1954, Gamal Abdel Nasser rose to power in Egypt. Syria was in chaos with constant coups, and Beirut had become the center of political intrigue, full of spies, defectors, revolutionaries, and journalists. Shula moved through this world with ease, maybe too much ease. She kept meeting people, running missions, helping Israel, and recruiting new informants. She believed she was untouchable, but someone was already watching. On the streets of Beirut, new faces began asking too many questions. And among those who once called her Monsieur Shula, some were now quietly wondering, whose side was she really on? By the late 1950s, the political map of the Middle East was changing fast. In 1958, Egypt and Syria united to form the United Arab Republic, a new regional power inspired by Nasser's pan-Arab ideals. Lebanon descended into chaos. Gunfire echoed through the streets of Beirut. The city was divided into sectors, the Christian Ashrafiyah and the Muslim Basta. Between them lay a narrow front line, the Jewish quarter of Wadi Abu Jamil, trapped between 2 warring sides. These were dark days. Jewish families lived under constant shelling, unsure who was more dangerous, the Christians or the Muslims. And beyond Lebanon, the region was no calmer. Revolutions, coups, executions. In Iraq, the monarchy was overthrown by the army. The streets of Amman and Baghdad ran red with blood. In July 1958, the U.S. 6th Fleet landed in Beirut, trying to prevent total collapse. But the Americans didn't intervene. The city was effectively broken apart. Control passed to armed militias, and order was maintained only by Christian and Muslim phalanges. Around that time, in southern Beirut, near the Jewish cemetery, an incident nearly ended in tragedy. During the funeral of one riot victim, 10 Jewish men were kidnapped. No one knew where they were being held. So once again, Shula acted on her own. Without waiting for help, she contacted Mohammed Arnaout, nicknamed Abu Mustafa, a Syrian who led armed groups in the Muslim Basta district. Everyone feared him. Even the police didn't dare enter his territory. But Shula went herself. She walked straight into the heart of Basta, a place no Jew had ever dared to go. Using all her charm and steely confidence, she persuaded the Tiger, as Abu Mustafa was called, to release the hostages. And he did. The men returned alive. It could have been her last victory. A few days later, the Tiger came to her house, this time with different orders. He had been told to kidnap Shula and take her to Damascus. Syrian intelligence wanted to interrogate her along with other agents, including her longtime associate, Albert Elia. What he didn't know was that the woman he was ordered to capture was the legendary Pearl. When he entered her home, Shula immediately realized what was happening. Coldly and calmly, she convinced Abu Mustafa to let her go. "If they take me," she said, "I'll tell them I know you. They'll execute you too." He understood she was right. Not only did he let her escape, he helped her reach the airport and even arranged a document showing her name on the passenger list of a flight from the day before. Shula boarded the first plane out of Lebanon. When she reported the incident to her Israeli handlers, they were firm. "You must never go back. Ever." But a week later, she returned. The situation seemed calmer. Shula was free and desperate to see her family again. She didn't realize that everything had changed. Her old connections had weakened, her influence had faded, and danger was closing in. Even her longtime ally, former counterintelligence chief George Anton, warned her, "I'm leaving. It's too dangerous now. You should go too." He left for South America. But Shula stayed. She kept working, this time with a new assistant, Mohammed Awad, a greedy and unreliable man who would do anything for money. Through him, Shula continued passing information and coordinating operations, unaware she was walking straight into a trap. She often traveled to Israel through Istanbul, and once she was forced to stay in Rome for almost 3 months. Her husband begged her to come home. Awad called too. He needed her money. But while she was away, Lebanon's secret police had begun tailing Awad. They sent an undercover agent posing as his partner, whose real goal was to expose him. The trap worked perfectly. When Shula returned in February 1961, everything was already in place. A week later, she was arrested. Her husband Joseph was taken too, accused of financing her operations. So were her allies, Albert Elia and Mohammed Awad. Awad's interrogation lasted 36 hours and filled over 300 pages. Shula admitted she had helped Jews escape to Israel, but denied espionage or treason. It didn't matter. The investigation was already staged. Syrian intelligence, eager to embarrass Lebanon, leaked details of the Israeli spy case to the press. Newspapers screamed about Mossad's infiltration into Lebanon's upper class. Shula endured brutal torture and endless interrogations. She was thrown into prison with murderers, prostitutes, and drug traffickers, watched over by a sadistic female guard who took pleasure in her suffering. She was sentenced to death, but the punishment was reduced to 20 years in prison, then later to 7, out of mercy for the mother of 7 children. Shula Kishik-Cohen spent 6 long years behind bars, the only Jewish woman among 2,000 inmates. But even there, surrounded by thieves, murderers, and drug dealers, she managed to earn respect. In prison, they still called her by the same name, Madame Shula. She never lowered her gaze, never complained, never lost her dignity. She listened, protected the weak, and even settled disputes between prisoners. Her strength wasn't in weapons or secrets. It was in her quiet, unshakable confidence, the same inner power that had helped her survive before. Then came 1967, a turning point. Israel won a swift and decisive victory in the Six-Day War, and a few months later came a prisoner exchange. Among those waiting at the Rosh Hanikra border crossing was Shula. Exhausted, frail, but still proud, she stepped onto Israeli soil. Beside her was her husband Joseph, who had also been freed from a Lebanese prison. Their children had been secretly smuggled out through Cyprus, and after long years of separation, the family was finally reunited. For Shula, a new life began. She settled in Jerusalem, the city of her childhood, now part of a free nation she had once risked her life for. It seemed she could finally allow herself to simply be a mother and grandmother. Shula never liked to talk about her past. Only occasionally, when speaking to soldiers or students, she would tell, calmly, without drama, what courage truly meant. She used to say, "Fear has a sound. It's the breath you hear behind your back when you cross a border at night. And loyalty has a smell. Gunpowder, salt, and paper with someone else's name on it." The decades passed. Israel went through wars and peace treaties, new leaders and new enemies. And Shula lived quietly in Jerusalem, surrounded by the family she had fought so hard to keep. On May 21, 2017, on the eve of the 50th anniversary of the war that had brought her freedom, Shula Kishik-Cohen passed away at the age of 100. Around her were her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. On the wall hung her medals of honor from the State of Israel. She lived 50 years longer than her death sentence had predicted. So ended the story of a woman who, to some, was a spy, to others, a hero, and to her family, simply a mother. And what do you think? Can a mother of 7 risk her life for her country? Or are such sacrifices too high a price to pay? Leave a comment, give this video a like, and thank you for watching.